Hey guys, before we get into today's episode, I just want to remind you that we are going to be doing a breakout session for BDOs at the Mid Americas Lenders Conference in Houston, Texas on April 15th, my son's birthday. If you want to level up your game in 2025, come see us live in person at MALC. The link to register is in the show notes, and we will see you there.
Warning: the views and opinions expressed in this program are our own and/or those of our guests. They do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of our employers. Viewers' discretion is advised.
Term sheets are like high school promise rings. They never come through. Kroge, true or false? Was your first term sheet created with a chisel and a slab of like rock?
If you're a BDO and the only way that you can close business is to offer the lowest rates out there in the market, you suck at your job.
One way that I've started to change my way of doing business a little bit is that I've started to send out some term sheets maybe that aren't credit backed.
Kroge, true or false? Was your first term sheet created with a chisel and a slab of like rock?
I had to climb to the top of Mount Sinai. And I had to get intervention to come down and tell me how to put together the first term sheet, because it was the very first term sheet ever created, right?
Right.
So I had to get divine inspiration on what to put together, and it was chiseled into granite. Do you know how hard it is to chisel granite? It was chiseled into granite, and I required
I eat granite for breakfast.
a 4 shekel deposits on my term sheets when I brought it down to the masses, and everybody waved and they clapped and they said, "What the hell is a SBA?" But I digress.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the BDO Show, a podcast for passionate BDOs wanting to level up their game with advice and stories from battle-tested BDOs. I'm your host, Emily Detor, and I'm here with my two co-hosts tonight, Sterling Birdsong and Ryan Kroge. At the beginning of each episode, we are going to remind you to smash that like button and subscribe and send to your friends, family, anybody in your network, and share, and then send over your topics and suggestions to the BDO Show at artofsba.com. And do not forget to check out our whole family of shows, which is SBA Today, airs live every week on LinkedIn, as well as our flagship program, The Art of SBA Lending. BDOs. Have you ever had a borrower bring in like a brother-in-law to do their life insurance? Doesn't end well, does it? We've all been there. When you require life insurance on your SBA loan, it's critical that you bring in a company that specializes in getting these policies in place for the SBA loans. The last thing you want is for life insurance to be the holdup. We all know that's a rookie mistake. SBA Protection Quick Close Life Insurance is the fastest, easiest way to secure the insurance protection that your borrower needs for their SBA loan. Their process is simple, hassle-free, and only takes a few minutes of your borrower's time. No lengthy paperwork, no complicated forms. They even have programs that don't require labs or doctor records for approval. And best of all, you will have the collateral assignment back in less than 24 hours. It's a no-brainer. Go to SBAprotection.com for more information or email Adam Bergen at adam@SBAprotection.com. Okay, today's episode, just us three, so let's make it interesting. We're going to talk about term sheets. We're actually going to talk about the acceptance rates of term sheets and like kind of dealing with shoppers, which I know that's very common in SBA lending specifically. So for the new BDOs, Sterling, why don't you kick us off? Tell us when a term sheet comes into play, when it's issued, what are some factors that lead up to a term sheet, and then we can get into the guts of how things change and evolve after it's issued or during it.
Every bank kind of has their own way of doing term sheets. I think what's most common is that it's usually the first thing that you'll really receive from a bank. Oftentimes at this point, maybe you've provided some information. Maybe you get a checklist of the initial items that you need in order to get started on a loan request. And then once a bank gets that back, usually that's their first indicator to you that, hey, this is a deal that we feel like is viable. And we feel like there's a potential that we could actually close on the structure that we're presenting to you. Here is the sources and uses, basically your project breakdown. Here's your estimated loan amount. Here's your estimated payment. Here's what we think the collateral is going to look like. So it's essentially a skeleton of what your actual loan documentation will look like and what you're essentially agreeing to. Now, are all term sheets created equal? The answer to that is no. Some term sheets are credit backed and some term sheets are not credit backed. And what does that mean? So sometimes certain banks will allow their BDOs to essentially issue a term sheet on whatever they like. They have full reign. They have the autonomy to say, hey, this is a deal I think looks good for the bank. And I can just go ahead and issue a term sheet on that, and I'll just go ahead and give it to you. But if that's a BDO that maybe doesn't understand their bank's credit appetite, or maybe doesn't have a credit background themselves, doesn't really know a deal when they see it, they could just be essentially giving you information that's really false, right? Because maybe their bank absolutely wants nothing to do with that deal whatsoever, and you just won't know until you actually go deeper into the process and you go through underwriting. And then that's where you end up with those horror stories. Well, hey, I worked with this bank for 2 months and they never told me they didn't like the deal until we went to committee. So that's a non-credit backed term sheet. Then obviously you have term sheets that are credit backed. And in those situations, oftentimes they're going to ask for a lot of information up front. They're going to take that, they're going to put it into a loan summary. They're going to present that loan summary internally. And then once they've done an internal presentation, if the bank buys in, then they will issue you a term sheet. At that point, at least you know the term sheet is very real because it is credit backed. It has been reviewed by people who would potentially be loan approvers. So there's really two ways of doing it. There's a credit backed and non-credit backed. What do I prefer? As a BDO, I prefer the non-credit backed. I like to be able to get paper off the street as soon as possible. And listen, there's pros and cons to both sides, right? As a BDO, you never want to essentially be giving false information to a customer. You never want a situation where you thought you were able to do something and you're not able to do something. So in that way, the credit backed term sheet is great, but the credit backed term sheet is also slow and speed kills. And I, as a BDO, do not want to wait a week until I can actually put a summary together and then get it in front of a committee, God forbid, or whatever the powers may be, then get you a quote unquote approved term sheet. And then at that point, you've gotten a term sheet from 2 other banks and you've already decided that you're going to move forward with the other bank because maybe you like their rate or maybe they just gave you a sense of security that they were able to get your deal done. Maybe they seem hungrier because they gave you something a little bit faster. And so there's definitely pros and cons to each. I think as the BDO, it's definitely beneficial on your side if you do have the autonomy to do it on your own, but you do have to be careful with that because it is a double-edged sword.
How slow is slow?
Ideally, you should be able to get a term sheet out to a customer within 3 days, 3 business days. I think anything longer than that, you are in slow zone. You were in slow motion. And listen, there's always the ideal world. There's the real world, right? You know, we say what's ideal and then we live in what's real. And so there are situations where it could potentially take longer to get a term sheet, especially if you're at a shop that requires it to be credit back before it goes out the door. If you're at a bank where they say, hey, we don't want you putting anything on the street without us at least saying, hey, yes, we like this and we are in favor of it, then there will be situations where it's going to take you 5 business days to get back to somebody, because what ends up happening is if you're a busy BDO who actually has a lot of motion, a lot of stuff going on, you're going to end up pre-flighting multiple deals in a week. Deals don't come in single file. That's not the way that this works, right? So
there's layers at all times.
Yeah. On Monday, you may have no deals. On Tuesday, you may have no deals. And on Wednesday, you may have 3. And that's just the way that it goes. And they'll all hit your inbox at the same time. This is a feast or famine, you know, when it rains, it pours type of industry, right? So especially once you start having wins and you start gaining momentum, the deals start coming in. And if you have to then put loan summaries together for each and every deal, you can get into a situation where all of a sudden you have 5 deals that need loan summaries. And it's like, now you got to pick and choose favorites and what you think you can get home on and what you can't get home on. So then it becomes a much more difficult scenario. And then your turnaround time, it slows down. So that's why I think if you want to be a high volume BDO, if you want to be a high volume shop, you do have to give your guys some rope. You got to give your guys some autonomy, let them be able to go out into the market and basically say, hey, this is a deal I think my bank would be willing to do. And then you got to take that risk, knowing that, unfortunately, not every one of those deals they put a term sheet out on is actually going to get done. And sometimes, you know, if you have a bad BDO, many of them won't get done. But the opportunity cost is that you could be losing out on those deals if you're not giving your guys the confidence to go out and actually win those deals.
What should lenders expect when borrowers are out there sort of like shopping around? Because we know that that's common and we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to hear it, but we know that it happens. What should you expect as a lender when you hand them a term sheet and they're like, well, hang on, I got some other options?
Well, you're not going to get it back right away. And as Sterling said, speed wins, but not always. So if you're the first one out with the term sheet, expect to sit back, put your feet up, and wait a couple weeks until all the other lenders get their credit behind it, talk to their boss, put it up the flagpole, see who salutes. And by that time, by the last lender who gets to put the term sheet together, they've probably already looked at 4 other term sheets. So they're the ones that really gets to sharpen their pencil and make the best transaction. So when you put a term sheet together, you should literally put your best foot forward and don't be the fastest one out. Take your time, talk to the customer, get your expectations, understand how to put things together. But more importantly, what I try to do is I try to consult them on why a certain structure is better than another structure. And then I try to educate them on what they're going to see out there, right? Because I've only been writing term sheets since 2014. Prior to 2014, there were really no need for term sheets. I work for local financial institutions. So all of our customers came to us, we put a structure together, and I would submit it to underwriting. And then the first time they would have to sign anything or give a deposit was at commitment. And that was very normal because you didn't have a whole lot of national lenders. And if you did, they really weren't in the Michigan market. You had CIT, Business Loan Express, Celtic Bank, and Zion National Bank. You had a bunch of those guys out there doing a lot of national stuff, but you didn't have a very big presence here in Michigan. So term sheets were not necessary until 2014. I did put the very first term sheet together at Huntington Bank when I worked for them. And it was just unheard of because I started seeing a lot of other lenders eat my lunch, right? I would go get a deal. I would structure it. I would put it together. I would counsel them. I would send it into underwriting, do all of our due diligence, put out a commitment letter, and then they would take it to all these other banks and they turn around and go, oh, we can do that. Here's a term sheet. Sign it and we'll take care of you. We'll drop it a couple bips on the rate just to make it more attractive. And then we'd go through that whole entire process and I'm not getting commitments signed. And I hate not getting commitments signed. I want 100% acceptance rate on my commitment. There's no reason for a commitment letter not to be signed when it comes out, except for something like, I don't know, the seller backs out or the buyer and the seller just don't like anything or something comes up in due diligence. And I started putting a term sheet together because I number one, I physically wanted them to see in writing besides an email and sign it how I was structuring the deal. I mean, the term sheet is more than just getting it off the streets. It's acceptance on both sides that, hey, I'm structuring the deal this way and you're accepting the way that I'm structuring the deal. You like it. By signing this, you like it. And then you're giving me a deposit because if I go through underwriting and you don't accept the commitment, I need something for my time. I need something for the underwriter's time, right? Mm-hmm. So I started writing term sheets back in 2014 simply for the fact that I wanted the customer to understand exactly how I was structuring. Because that's another thing, too. If you don't have it in writing and you get a commitment letter out, like, oh, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do that. Well, if you have a term sheet, you say, no, you did. You signed my term sheet. It's the exact same thing.
That's crazy to me that you guys ever operated without term sheets. I mean, I've been in SBA lending since 2016. So, I never operated in a world where you didn't issue term sheets to customers because it just sounds like that's just a way for so much confusion to be created.
But is that because, Kroge, you were local and you were national? Is there a difference?
And absolutely. Because I was local, I was physically sitting in a room with all the decision makers. I was sitting with the owner of the business. I was usually sitting with their attorney, with their CPA, and I'm physically telling them how I'm structuring the deal. Or I would shoot them an email with how I was structuring the deal. So that was the acceptance that they liked the way it was put together, right? It was either verbally with other witnesses or it was in an email. Then everyone was like, yeah, let's go. And I still didn't do term sheets on every single deal until I left Huntington, until 2016. So from 14 to 16, I was only doing term sheets on transactions that I knew they were shopping, right? I had that feeling because, whenever you got a lead from a broker, they're shopping it. If I were getting a lead from a CPA, an attorney, someone trusted that I met locally, those are my people, right? most people don't go against the grain of their attorney and their CPA. There's three people that are truly important in every deal you put together: your lender, your CPA, and your attorney. They're the ones that are on your side and only benefit when you succeed in any transaction. Those three people, right? So most people don't go against the grain when one refers the other. All right. So in 2016, I left Huntington, became a national lender, and then boom, it was term sheet on every single transaction. It was deposit on every transaction. Because once you get out there in the world and you're on a national footprint, you're dealing and you're working for a bank that people locally have never heard of before, right? I still get to this day, people don't really recognize the name First Internet Bank. Like, what the heck is First Internet Bank? I looked it up. You guys are in Indianapolis. What are you doing in Rochester? And then I have to explain to them on how we're just so awesome that we can't just be contained in a little town in Indiana.
We are the internet.
We are the internet, baby. We stretch from coast to coast. We cannot be contained. We can't be stopped. We got to go out and we got to touch all the salt water on each side of the
I tell people we go everywhere the money goes.
That's right.
If the money goes there, we don't go there too.
I won't go to Canada. Unless they become the 51st state, then we'll go to Canada. Man, I can't wait. Can you imagine?
No.
all the maple syrup refineries, all the Labatt
USDA deals, a whole bunch of stuff.
But also, hang on. If you got a DWI, you're not allowed to go into Canada. How does that work with that situation? Not that I don't have one, for the record.
If they become a state, you're good to go. And actually, the law is if you got arrested for a misdemeanor or a felony within the last 10 years, you're not allowed to go into the great state, country of Canada for at least 10 years. Yeah.
America's hat.
America's hat.
Even a misdemeanor? You can't go to Canada for 10 years because of misdemeanors?
Because of misdemeanors. And the most common misdemeanor in America is a DWI, which in Canada, I don't think you're allowed to get your license unless you've had a DWI. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's like, aren't they born with DWIs?
You can drive under duress if you haven't done it. You don't have a DWI.
There's three things.
You're qualified.
There's three things that Canadians know very well: hockey. Well, you could throw that out the window after this week. Maple syrup,
beer,
and drinking. They know how. So you're talking to a guy who lived in Michigan, who grew up with going to hunting cabin up north, listening to a radio show called Green Light, Red Light. The Green and Red Show, excuse me. And it was a Canadian-based radio show that was as stereotypical as a Youper or a Canadian can get. And that's where I got all my knowledge of the great entire country, or 51st state of Canada.
For years, SBA lenders have relied on referral sources because, let's be honest, reaching businesses directly is just not how the industry worked. It was too hard to find the right contact info. And when you did, actually getting them to engage felt impossible. When Ray first heard about this, he was skeptical because he gets pitched every single day. But 15 minutes into this demo, he realized something. This could actually work. Resquared lets you reach local business owners at scale in a way that actually works. Ray's been using it for a few months now, and not only is it effective, but it's kind of fun. In just a few minutes a week, he's sending targeted messages to small business owners and getting real conversations started. Like the childcare owner he connected with that was looking to buy their second location with an SBA loan. If you ever considered connecting with small business owners and didn't have the right tool to do it, this is it. Resquared is offering a discount just for BDO Show listeners. So go ahead and schedule your demo today, and we'll leave a link in the show notes for you below. I think we were at the BDO retreat this last year, or it was one of the conferences. And I remember Jared saying, term sheets are like high school promise rings. They never come through. And I was like, what?
It's funny. And you can follow up, or you can just check in with all you want on term sheets. Honestly, if that person just doesn't like it, then they're not going to accept it. And here's the deal. I don't want to be the lender of last resort. I don't. All right. I put a good term sheet together, and I put a good structure together so that you can get the best transaction possible. All right. I don't put it together just for my health. I don't put it together to show off to other banks, even though it's kind of nice that I do. I'm smarter than they are. But I put it together so I can win the deal.
But let's get into other lenders offering unrealistic terms to beat you. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, if someone's offering something that's outside of the scope of what you're willing to offer, then, you should just tell them that they should take that deal. Who am I to stand between you and a good deal? If you feel like somebody wants to offer you prime plus one, I've seen all types of stuff recently. I've seen prime minus. So if somebody wants to offer you prime minus, yeah, it's like, okay, well, if that's what you're going to get, I mean, I'm not even in the ballpark for that. That's not the type of stuff that we do here. Our business model is completely different than their business model. And if you can actually get approved through them and they actually want to do your deal, then you'd be stupid not to take that.
So this is what I've been doing. What I've been doing recently is there is a bank in my market that offers prime minus or prime plus one. I mean, they just give the bank away, right? They're trying to buy the business because they've got, a rocky reputation lately. And so I've been collecting names and phone numbers of customers that I have closed because that financial institution couldn't close them, right? They wrote a term sheet. They put a structure out there that was just unbelievable. And then they take it into credit committee and they're just like, we're not doing this deal. Why are you even bringing this in here? This is where it comes into, we've had a couple shows before where you're talking about order takers instead of market makers, right? People who just write down whatever they can because they're not BDOs, they're not business development people. They're specialists. They specialize in taking orders. And then they throw it into credit and it can't get done. And then they have to come back to me and say, we tried to go for that prime minus a half point and they turned us down. So now we have to go with you because we know you can get it done. Then I get it done. I collect their information. So when somebody else comes and say, hey, I love your term sheet, your structure and everything looks great, but this bank over here is offering this. I'm like, that's fantastic. They're offering a really good deal. The problem is based on your transaction, what your need is, they're not going to be able to get it done because it doesn't fit their credit box. And as a BDO, you got to know what your competition's credit box is. You have to know what it is. And I'll tell them, don't take my word for it. Here's 3 names and numbers of individuals who gave me the okay to hand out to tell you how their experience with that financial institution was and why they came back and they closed with me. And I just cycled those names out. I've got about 5 of them right now, and I'll give 2 names out per person that comes with a term sheet from that financial institution that says, can you beat this? No, I can't beat that. But I'll give you the name and number of someone who thought that they could beat that they would be able to close at that institution and couldn't.
So one thing I would say is that I am starting to see a lot more competition in the market. And I've definitely seen that a lot of banks are trying to win through pricing. And I don't have any issue against that. I mean, it's their prerogative. They're able to price their paper however they see fit. And again, a lot of these banks operate with different business models. For some people, they don't really rely on SBA premium income as a huge income revenue generation tool for their bank. Sometimes they really just want to do essentially conventional deals with an SBA guarantee attached to them, which is a whole different ball game, right? It's just a risk mitigation tool, not an income driver per se. So, everyone's willing to treat the product the way that they want to treat the product. And as long as it's in the spirit of the program, then I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. But you are certainly starting to see a lot more competition. A lot more banks are interested in SBA for whatever reason that may be. And so I would say that the amount of term sheets that I've put out that have all of a sudden not come back signed has probably gone up in the last 12 months or so. I don't think I'm pricing any differently. I don't think I'm treating customers any differently. And sometimes it is just because people are getting stupid rates from places. Right. I had a deal that I did lose out on over 25 basis points last week. And I mean, I knew that they were shopping the deal heavily because I knew who the referral source was and that they had bank connects. And so I came in well lower than I would normally come in. I came in at 2.25 above prime, which, is not normally where I come in for a BizAc. It was a strong deal. It warranted certainly, some superior pricing, but the bank that they ended up going with came in off the bat at prime plus 2. That just didn't happen as much a year or 2 ago. There were, I guess, maybe not as much people in the market who were pricing that way, but also there wasn't as much knowledge in the market, both in terms of on the buyer side or the customer side, and also I would say on the bank and the BDO side. I mean, let's face it, what we're doing right here on this show is actually creating our own competition, right? We're here training a new class of BDOs essentially on how to work the market and being very open and transparent about how we price, knowing that, they can come in at prime plus 2% if they're at the right shop and potentially win some deals. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's certainly been a shift in the market in the last 12 months or so. And, even with rates starting to generally come down a little bit, I think that banks are pricing a little bit more aggressively because now they've gotten a taste of the SBA income and what it can do for their bank. And once you get hooked on that, it's hard to let it go. But there's only so much of it out there. And when there's more and more competition, well, how do you win it? It's a race to the bottom. So it'll be interesting to see what'll happen now over the next couple of years as more and more SBA lenders come on board here, both in terms of banks and in terms of new BDOs that are just going to be placed in the market. And goals are not going to go down. They only go up. If your bank did 100 million last year, they want to do 150 million next year, and so on and so forth. And so how big can this whole thing really get? Or is there enough business out there truly for us to continue to do, everyone doing 50 million plus, right?
And let me get close to the mic so everybody can hear me when I say this.
Ooh. Story time with Grandpa Kroge.
If you're a BDO and the only way that you can close business is to offer the lowest rates out there in the market, you suck at your job. You're garbage. All right. Get out of the business. Okay. Just go. You're buying business. You're not generating business. You're buying it. All right. And you're garbage. You're trash.
No, I mean, listen, again, I don't begrudge any way that the way that they price. I think a lot of it is driven by the bank that you work at. And if your bank is, and honestly, let's be honest, it's driven by the way your bank incentivizes you, right? If your bank is incentivizing you to charge lower rates because it doesn't actually hurt your pocket, then essentially they are telling you what they want you to do, right? So, if your bank says, hey, you can price at prime plus 1 and your commission's the same as if you price at prime plus 3, well, then every BDO is going to start pricing at prime plus 1 in that shop because they're trying to win as much business as they possibly can.
Absolutely. I can't knock the hustle.
I can't knock the hustle. And ultimately, I mean, listen, so what you're really referring to is the BDOs who are at shops where you are incentivized to maybe price a little bit higher and to win a little bit more income for the bank because, I know people hate it when we talk about pricing on this show because they feel like we're being greedy, but ultimately we work for for-profit organizations. We work for banks whose job is to maximize shareholder value, right? That's the way that the market works. And, a lot of these people also own stock and they would love it if their stock portfolio went up in their 401k, right? That's the way that this world works. We price a little bit higher. The bank earns a little bit more. A deal gets done and grandma gets to retire. That's just the way that this whole thing goes. So what you're talking about, though, is really people who work at shops where you're incentivized to price higher and then they're still undercutting, even maybe their own BDOs in their shop or people in the market by pricing low and essentially making no money. Right. They're basically saying, I'm okay taking the hit just because I'm so desperate to find business. And a lot of times that just comes down to, honestly, laziness. If you're not willing to work and actually prospect, actually network and build a network of people who want to send you deals, and then you don't actually know your product to where when you get on the phone with the customer, you can wow them. I mean, listen, guys, when I talk to customers who don't know much about SBA, they leave that call after 30 minutes getting basically a crash course in SBA lending. I wow them with the most basic knowledge that any BDO should know. But I know it like the back of my hands, and I know so many different scenarios and so many different situations that apply to their particular situation, and I can just give them examples or I can just educate them to say, hey, there's two schools of, there's two masters you have to serve with SBA lending. There's the SBA rules and there's the bank rules. And this is the minimum guidelines, and then the bank layers their own credit risk appetite on top of this. And I'm going to talk to you about what the SBA allows you to do and what a bank will realistically approve you to do. And they are not the same thing. And I explain that to people and they're like, oh my God, no one's ever actually taken the time to explain how this whole thing works. Think about it this way. If you know 1% and they know 0%, you know 100% more than they know. So if you're a young BDO out there,
look at you doing math. I didn't even need my abacus for that.
I used the abacus at Mary's house last night. Her son has one, and I was messing with it. I'm like, hey, this is what Kroge uses.
All I saw in that picture was abacus and tequila. I was like, this is like pure nightmare fuel. Like, what is going on in that kitchen right now?
That's what I saw.
And a baby monitor. Oh my God. It was like, this all three of this stuff is like going to keep me up at night. But anyways, but listen, as a BDO, you should be able to get on the phone with your customer and legitimately impress them with your knowledge. And again, this isn't even stuff that is like high level for a BDO. This should be like pure basic SOP type of language. If you're doing that and you're actually prospecting, then you don't have to win with pricing.
So your referral sources should have faith in you as well. And you should know your referral sources. If you know you have a referral source that's going to shoot it out to about 5 or 6 different banks, understand you're not going to win every deal. But if you've got a referral source that used to shoot it out to 5 or 6 different banks, but realizes that 100% of the time you get them done quickly and the right way, you're now creating people that are working for you. You're now got a referral source that's only going to send it to you. And again, the more people you get on your side referring deals and saying, if you got an SBA deal, Kroge's your guy. If you've got this type of transaction, Kroge's your guy. There's like a 98% chance that they're going to stick with you. And if you stick with your guns, they'll understand that you're not somebody that waffles back and forth and gets a little scared whenever somebody comes up with the lower price.
Speaking of story time with Grandpa Kroge or young Sterling, have you guys ever been like had your term sheet out and it's rejected?
Can we start a new segment, Emily?
Right now?
Story time with Grandpa Kroge.
Yeah, especially with that like corner view we got going on and like your old leather chair and your dated bookshelf. It's great.
Story time with Grandpa Kroge.
You need the readers like down on your nose like this. He's got them. He's got them, folks.
You know I do.
Of course he has readers.
Sterling, me and you don't need readers for a few more years yet, at least.
We don't. I got the blue blockers actually that I use.
Yeah, mine are built in.
When I'm on the computer for a long time.
Twins.
There you go.
Tell us a poem about term sheets, Kroge. Come on.
I actually want to start this over again. I want to start a new segment called Story Time with Grandpa Kroge. Almost forgot my readers. How would I be able to read it without them? Once upon a time, not long ago, you really didn't have to do term sheets. But I tell you what, now that we have to do term sheets, you have competition everywhere. And you're going to have to know what to do when you run across competition. So you're going to have to sharpen your pencils sometimes. And I'm not talking about sharpening on the interest rate. Sharpen it on what the customer needs. Too many people get into the zone where they'll pick up a deal. They'll see how they think it needs to be structured, slap it together, put it on a term sheet, and that's their best offer, right? When in fact, if you take the time, like Sterling said earlier, listen to what they have to say, understand the pain points, understand what they need, and then just sweeten it that much more, you're going to create a structure and you're going to create a position where you are the consultant. All right? You're more than just a lender. You've consulted them on the best way for them to look at an acquisition. And once they realize how much value you bring to the table, it's more than just up front. You're going to be their consultant throughout the whole entire loan process. And you're going to help them realize this financial need well into the closing and beyond. And that's something that's more valuable than just coming to the table a quarter point less than the next person. And, if they want to go and run down the street to the, shorter skirt, let them go. Because I always tell them, they'll be back.
Get those off right now.
You don't like my readers?
They're okay. They're cute.
I tell you what, I threw these things out. I'm like, damn, my kids must have been in here messing with them. Because there are smudge prints and everything. My daughter likes to think that she looks more studious when she's wearing my readers. So she comes in here, sits at my desk, and pretends to be working with my readers on.
My readers. Say my readers one more time.
My readers.
What? So old.
With my Midwestern accent, is that it?
That's like my mom will be like, my computer game. It's mine. I own it. I'm like, okay.
And we get them from Costco too. Costco has the best value for readers. Just go in there, get your prescription. It's like $5.
You can get a hot dog, glasses, and a 55 pack of toilet paper all in the same place.
Buy a paper, a glizzy, and be able to read them with $5 readers. Are you kidding me? What a country. They couldn't do that in Canada.
No, they couldn't. Is there anything else we should talk about term sheets that we should?
About term sheets? No, but let's talk about the most important thing that's going on this week. Party in Tampa. Tampa is about to get set off beginning tomorrow at, what is it called? The Meat Factory?
The Meat Market.
The Meat Market. Tomorrow,
Madison, send all these boys GoPros. PM. I want the live footage.
You are going to see the best boys' night out that you're ever going to see, all led by the one and only, the General. Yes, the General is going to be leading the charge. It's going to be phenomenal. I cannot
It'll be hard to see us over the seafood towers. That's all I'm going to say.
There'll be seafood towers in front of everybody. It'll be unbelievable. Alan Peterson, one of the BDO Show staples here on this podcast. It is his 39th birthday coming up on Friday, and we are going to go see Lil Wayne and the Hot Boys. We got a suite all set up. We're having bottles popping. We're going to have champagne flowing. We're going to have
party bus.
We got a party bus. We're going to be partying all night. It's going to be an absolute blast. So if you're in the Tampa area, I just wanted you to know that you need to be jealous. You need to be so jealous. You need to be green and envy, because we're going to be lighting the town on fire, and you're not going to be anywhere to get close.
Kroge's hips are going to hurt the next day. He's going to have a limp.
My legs are going to be so sore.
Just let the beat drop right there, okay? When you're in post.
That's right.
BDO Show after dark. So now that story time is done with Grandpa Kroge, what are some parting thoughts or advice, or maybe just some general knowledge on new BDOs entering the workforce and pumping out a term sheet? Like, what can they expect? What kind of value can you add to them to just keep it going and not to get flustered, especially because they could, potentially have no term sheets for a while, and then all of a sudden there's just, like you said, when it rains, it pours.
Well, one thing I would say is that, try and waste as little time as possible on tire kickers. If you know that there's people out there who are going to be shopping you all over the place, don't spend 6 hours putting together a loan summary and then, waiting to go to committee and eventually hopefully getting a yes, just so you can then put out your term sheet and then get declined by the customer. One way that I've started to change my way of doing business a little bit is that I've started to send out some term sheets maybe that aren't credit backed, but I know that we do have a pre-flight process here at the bank, and there's a requirement if a loan's over $1 million and it needs to be pre-flighted, it needs to be blessed. So before it will actually go into underwriting, and I start using up the bank resources, I will still pre-flight the loan, right? But I only want to do that if I know the customer is going to move forward with me and they're willing to sign my term sheet. Before, what I was doing, I was spending so many hours putting together these pre-flights just to send them out to a customer, and then they wouldn't sign the term sheet and I would just waste time. So now I'm doing the opposite. I'm going to let them decide if they want to work with me, and then I will ultimately see whether or not we want to move forward with that term sheet and move forward with the underwriting process. At the end of the day, it's no different than what every other bank is doing. And you have to compete in the market and what your competitors are doing. So, to me, I think that that's the smart way to play it out. So if I was a young BDO out there, that's something that I would potentially do, as long as it's okay with your bank, as long as you're not going to get in trouble, don't get fired over putting out rogue term sheets. But, just be cognizant of protecting your time.
And I want to make sure everybody understands that we are talking about term sheets. All right. And that when you put together term sheets, you want to put together the best term sheet available to the market. So make sure that those term sheets are solid. No,
I think we need to
say term sheets more.
How many times have we said it on this episode?
It's tough, but hey, my advice is just be who you are, be the consultant that made you successful. All right. So be that voice. Go back to your finance 101 classes. Understand how to look at financial statements, understand cash cycles, understand inventory cycles, and be that consultant to the buyer. Like, hey, your cash cycle is going to be really, really long. You're going to need more working capital in this deal. So I'm going to give you a line of credit. Not every bank can give a line of credit. That's a value add. You're going to have inventory turnover that's really fast. So make sure that you give enough working capital to build up that inventory when they buy it, or else it won't be there. Be that consultant that understands the business and understands what's going to give them a competitive advantage when they make the acquisition, and stop worrying about what your competitive advantage is going to be on the interest rate, because there's always going to be a bank. There's always going to be a bank out there with a better interest rate. All right. There's always going to be a shorter skirt for you to chase. Don't worry about that. All right. If they're going to go after that and they're just going to go for whatever's the lower rate, then that's on them. That's their choice. But when that other bank falls flat, they want to remember the person that gave them the consultation to give the best decision and the best advice to make that acquisition. And they're going to come back to you 100% of the time.
Thank you, Grandpa Kroge.
Oh, you're welcome, sweetie.
All right, guys, great episode. Thank you for everybody who tuned in, listened, streamed, however you consumed the BDO show today. If you want to send any topics or suggestions for season 2, go ahead and send those to the BDO show at artofsba.com, and we will see you next time.